The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View. The show is sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee, and if you like to attend our meetings, they're the second Thursday of every month at 6:30 at the Crown Plaza. And if you want to find out more about our organization, you can go to nashuagop.org to see our website and learn about the events that we have.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome our guest, Ron. Ron, you're running for Alderman in
Ward 8.
Ward 8, huh?
Yes.
And Ward 8, and this is your first time running for Alderman's office, but last year you ran as representative.
Yes, I ran for state rep in the same district last year, and that went well, although I didn't secure a seat. I was happy with the way that went, and afterwards I gave it some thought and decided I wanted to pursue something on the local level.
Good. Well, we'd like to see younger people come in and bring their ideas into what's happening in this town. And it's going to be a new Board of Aldermen. It's going to be a new mayor.
It is, yeah.
Everything's going to be interesting to see.
Interesting to be sure. And, one of the things I've heard from people, of course, I get a lot of comments about my age, but one of the best parts of the positive feedback that I get is that people say, we really want someone in there with some fresh ideas. So that's really what I'm hoping to bring.
Well, good. Tell us a little bit more about your ideas, what main concerns are, and what you think you'd be able to do if elected.
So my first concern is really budgetary. Since I've lived here, I've followed things, and when I first started looking at the city's budget, of course, I noticed that education is far and away the most significant part of it. And I looked at the spending there, and I started going through a breakdown, and I saw that over a 10-year period, now this was a few years ago when I first looked at this, but the trends have remained the same. Over a 10-year period, we spend about 50% more on education. In that same 10-year period, the number of students declines by about 100. So I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I'm seeing these spending increases and tax increases across the board. You've got people's property taxes that are the highest they've been since the 1990s. I'm thinking, it seems like we could be doing a better job here. So as we came into this year, there were, of course, some state government cuts that are going to result in some pretty substantial unfunded liabilities that the city is now going to have to pay for. And then we've got that coupled with some city contracts that I personally don't feel were particularly well negotiated by our outgoing mayor. So given this whole situation, what I really want to see now is our city focus its spending on paying for existing services and maintaining existing infrastructure.
Well, you don't have too much to say except sort of a final vote on the school board's budget. It's going to be kind of hard.
Yeah, we get an up or down vote there. So of course, it's important to make that count and make your point when you do that. But while we don't have control over how the school board spends its money, we can say, you know what, this budget may not be appropriate, send it back and try to get something better.
Have you thought about what committees you might be on if you're elected, or which one are you trying to be on?
Well, one of the things that interests me the most is economic development. So my budgetary concerns really stem from a situation where the city is just spending too much money per capita. I think we can do better to increase the tax base. We do want to get spending under control, of course, but for the economic viability of the city, we need to do a better job of making sure people are employed, well employed, not just, the McJobs, as they say, and start attracting businesses here that will provide better economic opportunity for people across the spectrum.
Well, you're in a ward that has a lot of development potential.
Yeah, so in Ward 8, we're like right at the center of that New England tech belt.
Right.
And that brings in a lot of high-tech jobs, and it brings people to the state. A lot of the people that I speak to in Ward 8 have moved to that area specifically for the economic opportunity that's provided there. So it's great that we have businesses that are attracting people, highly qualified people. But we also have a problem in the city at large with people who don't have good economic opportunity, and they're underqualified, they're unemployed or underemployed now, and that results in a disproportionate burden on taxpayers throughout the rest of the city. So what I'd really like to see is better economic development to bring better job opportunities to these people. And I think we can achieve that through better training offered through community college. I think we can do a better job of promoting vocational education. There's of course, been a push for a long time that to get everybody to go to college. But the reality is that in spite of those efforts, a lot of people aren't going to attend college for one reason or another. And the idea that we would be discouraging things like vocational education so that people could get these things like skilled manufacturing jobs, I think is unfortunate. It's been an unfortunate side effect of that. So I'd like to see us reverse that trend and make sure that we're really providing a solid economic opportunity to people, whether they've gone to college or not.
Well, I think that's the same idea up at the state, because as a part of the capital budget, we've given the community colleges a lot of money to develop new technology training, and Nashua is one of the better ones. But they're all over the state now, specialized welding, specialized car repair, and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who lived in Manchester until recently, and he was working to find a job that suited him well. He was an Army vet and wasn't really finding anything that his qualifications that suited his qualifications, and it turned out that a new business opened that was doing manufacturing of medical parts, mostly I think dental components, and he went in there with no training in that, and they invested in training him, and he was very well paid there, and that turned out to be a great opportunity for him. But there's only so many businesses that are going to have that willingness to go and just train people who have no experience. So if we can get that base in place, we can provide some basic level of education in these fields for people. We can see a lot more of that. We can see a lot better economic opportunities for these people.
Yeah, and the community colleges now are they've been linked up with the four-year colleges. So here in Nashua, the Granite State College, I think, is linked up with our community college.
Yeah.
So it's a lot less expensive to do the first 2 years at a community college and the last 2 years at a four-year school.
Yeah, I mean, New Hampshire was certainly behind the times on that. So it's good that we're finally there, and it's also good that people will be more inclined to start attending community college and not see it as an opportunity missed to go to a four-year school.
Well, what about some of the other local problems, especially with the drugs and the crime? What do you think about that? What can the aldermen do on that area?
So, we had the measure very recently that was voted on by the Board of Aldermen, approved and vetoed by the mayor for the panhandling situation. I think that's in part symptomatic of this, because you've got people who are begging, and many of these people are not, in fact, people in need, but people trying to feed an addiction. I don't think we're doing enough to be proactive in reaching out to these people and providing options for them to get help. That should be our focus. It shouldn't be on a new law saying you can't collect money on the side of the street. It should be on putting programs in place that really give people the opportunity to change their lives. This is not unprecedented. Gloucester, Massachusetts, earlier this year, put a measure in place that was promoted heavily by their chief of police. And essentially the system was, you show up to the police department and effectively turn yourself in, but there's going to be no criminal charges. Instead, we're going to get you into a drug rehab program. And since they implemented this in June, there's been dozens of people who have shown up looking to get help. So we can correct this problem or at least improve our situation by being more proactive, by destigmatizing getting help. One of the, it's kind of a double-edged sword here because I keep reading that heroin is becoming less stigmatized, and I don't know what groups of people this is where heroin seems like an okay thing to do, but I keep seeing this commentary that there's not the stigma around heroin that there used to be, and that's just terrifying to me. So the idea that there's not that much stigma around doing heroin, but we still have this stigma around getting help for addiction puts us in this terrible situation where you've got people falling prey to addiction and then being too afraid to go and get help.
Well, I think you had a lot of non-profit organizations in the town that should provide the type of help. Do you see any needs or any lack of sufficient support groups?
Well, I think there is. I mean, you've got, for example, a situation with the drug courts where you've got waiting lists for people to get into these programs. I mean, for someone who's really wants to get themselves clean and just improve their life situation, the idea that, well, there's help for you, but you're going to have to wait for it, doesn't work when you're suffering from addiction. I mean, you go downhill very quickly. So we've got to make sure that, first of all, people are aware that there's help available. And they know that, for example, if they need to call a paramedic or call the police, that they're not going to face arrest because they wanted to get help.
And you think that the hospitals here in town are able to help some of these people too, or do they have programs?
I'm not familiar enough with programs that the hospitals have in place to help with addiction, but I mean, at the point that people are going to hospitals, you're usually at a point where you need emergency help.
Yeah.
Most people are going to avoid that when they can. I don't think you have as much incentive to go out and seek help until you realize that you've got a problem. And very often that point is when the arrest has already occurred, which is why I think it needs to happen with our police department in cooperation. And I come from a position that we should be as compassionate as reasonably possible. A lot of these people, even the low-level dealers, are people who are doing it to feed an addiction. They're not being rational, and addiction itself, well, it's said often that addiction is a disease. Addiction is, I think, worse than a disease, but we should treat it with the same kind of compassion that we would treat someone with any disease with. They've got a problem. Let's first give them an opportunity to get help.
Well, it sounds like it's a good objective. Hopefully you contribute to curing some of our problems along that line.
I hope so.
Well, let's switch over to the developing downtown. What did you think we can do? The Broad Street Parkway is going to help some areas over there. Maybe that gets developed in a technical center of some sort.
Yes.
But the stores and everything, what do we do to make that more popular?
So now we're in a kind of a position here where we don't know how the Broad Street Parkway is really going to affect downtown, and by some degree we do have to kind of take stock of what impact that's going to have. One of the concerns I have with the Broad Street Parkway, of course, it's likely we'll see a lot of economic development along the parkway itself, in addition to the Mills area and the industrial area there that we're hoping to bring businesses to. But one of the concerns I have is that as Broad Street Parkway gets developed, you'll see businesses going there, but they're not going to be businesses that are new to Nashua. They're going to be businesses that are relocating from other areas within Nashua. So we really need to make sure that there is kind of a connect between the development that's happening on Broad Street and downtown itself. We need to have that be a corridor that people come through to get downtown, not just be the new destination. We can do a better job of listening to business owners. It was presumed that that parking was going to be the #1 concern that business owners had, and it turned out to be panhandling. We can do a better job of addressing those situations, engaging with business owners, finding out what their needs are. And I think making downtown just more attractive on a superficial level and spending money on that is not really what's going to solve the problem. The problem is deeper than that. And we can't pave over the problem with downtown. We really need to engage with people who would have an interest in developing their business there and find out, okay, what do you need? What's going to help you?
Well, you have one candidate for mayor who wants to develop the riverfront. And you think that might be something that, is a little bit of a start there, but, and it's not going to become another San Antonio, but there's a nice stretch of river that might be developed for shops and other types of businesses that you might find downtown.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Nashua, while it's a very nice city, it just subjectively doesn't compare to the beauty of the experience when you go to like downtown Portsmouth, for example. When you're there, you don't feel like you're going to take a step in the wrong direction. You're not worried that you're going to walk one street in the wrong direction and be worried about your safety. So Nashua, I would like to see Nashua do a better job of creating a downtown environment where that is an attraction unto itself and that draws people in. It's an environment where people feel comfortable. So yeah, the direction that we try and encourage development will have something to do with that. Of course, we can't neglect Main Street itself. Main Street's always going to be the core of downtown. So I think we need to look at that first. We need to improve the parking situation, of course. And I think there are some proposals worthy of consideration for that. I think for example, the diagonal parking is something that we should consider. But as I said before, we need to see what impact the Broad Street Parkway is going to have. How is that going to affect traffic? How is that going to affect the parking situation? And once we get a sense of how things are shaping up, we can have a better idea of where we go with it.
Well, good. There are other things that people are looking at for Nashua. One is the rail connection. Where do you stand on that?
So I am very cautious about some of the assertions that are made with regard to the economic benefit of rail. Before I lived in Nashua, I lived in Rochester, New York. That's where I went to school. And there was a project there called the Fast Ferry. The Fast Ferry was, I believe it was a $250 million project, if I recall correctly. And it was decades in the making. The ferry was a sort of the capstone of an outgoing mayor's career, and it ran for about 6 weeks.
Oh, really?
6 weeks. $250 million bought 6 weeks of this ferry service between Rochester, New York, and Toronto. Now, when this was being promoted, there were all sorts of studies and statistics that were presented saying it's going to help people commuting for work, it's going to bring in tourism, all these economic benefits, and it turned out to be a huge boondoggle. So when I look at the assertions that are made of the economic benefits of rail in Nashua, I approach them with some skepticism. I would like to see rail come to Nashua. When I first moved here, I was a bit surprised to see that, well, why does the rail stop in Lowell? Why doesn't it come up here? I mean, there's literally tracks already existing. So it's something I'd like to see happen, but we need to approach that situation and make sure that however, if we do decide to move forward on it, how we move forward is in a way that is financially viable, that is fiscally responsible for the people of Nashua. I wouldn't have a problem with us, for example, covering some upfront cost if we know that we've got a plan in place to make it sustainable. We definitely need to engage with the state government, federal government, Massachusetts and Tingsboro, and make sure we're all working together and everyone is shouldering some of this burden to get the logistics of that in place. But it's been a long road so far, and it's going to be a long road before it happens. But I favor continuing to study it, continuing to look at it, and trying to come up with a viable plan to make it happen.
Well, I think that people down here don't realize the rest of the state doesn't want to pay for it.
Right.
And what you're going to have to do is convince there's some good that will come of it for the rest of the state.
Yes.
And I think that's the economic development plan. Now, if you have, and look, the Public Works and Highways Department does the capital budget. They're the ones that negated the $4 million that the governor wanted to spend.
Right.
That really was dead on arrival. We talked about it there, and we couldn't get more than 6 votes for even phase 1, let alone phase 2, out of 20. I think if you have things going together, we have this 10-year plan we're working on now on roads and stuff. Roads with the southbound exit down the Pheasant Lane might entice them to build at least the first phase, which is right up to Pheasant Lane.
Yes.
The circumferential highway around Hudson, the bridge north of Nashua, which would help the traffic on Amherst Street, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And other things like that might be able to, when you tie it all together, you're going to bring people from adjacent cities around here.
Yes.
That want to commute into Boston, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, and you mentioned the first phase of it, which was to bring it from Tingsboro to Pheasant Lane Mall. And when you look at the logistics of doing that, that project could absolutely be a 100% Massachusetts project. You can get all the way up to the Pheasant Lane parking lot on existing rail. So if we're going to prove that it's economically viable and that we're going to have partnership and support from Massachusetts and Tingsboro to make it happen, I think we need to push for that first phase to happen. And that's not to say that we don't play a part in helping make that happen, but we also need to see that there's commitment from Massachusetts that they want this extension to go forward.
And you might even be able to get some of their highway money for the exit, because that's going to be partially in Massachusetts also.
Right.
So something to think about, but you got to work with a surrounding group, and there's a need for east-west travel in New Hampshire also.
Yes.
So if we could have some sort of transportation center, and we'll bring people in from all over and companies from all over.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges here is, of course, that in a sense, all roads lead to Boston.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, in northern New England, east-west travel is a challenge, and certainly looking at addressing that would help our economic situation. I mean, when people are coming up here to travel, they'll often just pick a corridor to go on. So, they'll go Nashua, Manchester, Concord, White Mountains, or they'll go up the seacoast. Yeah. So opening up more of the state, I think, is a good way of promoting these projects. You make it a package deal, right?
That's right, yeah.
Everybody gets something out of it.
Have the whole plan in there, and you bring in a lot more political power, let's say.
And it's more fair, too.
That's right.
It certainly, I wouldn't want to see the rest of the state burdened with paying something that's only going to help Nashua or Nashua, Manchester. We can, of course, we should promote the economic benefits of this, and an economic benefit for one part of the state is an economic benefit for the state as a whole. But certainly, I would not want to see something forced down people's throat throughout the state that is going to be full of bitterness and resentment because Nashua and Manchester were able to push it through.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that was the mistake from the beginning. They wanted to go all the way to Concord or nothing. In fact, they even thought of going all the way up to Montreal, but that would have been a $250 million. Anyway, Yeah, I think you're right that we can start here. We get to justify some of the estimates that have been made by just bringing them up to phase one. And if that works, then you can go to Manchester Airport. Then after that, you might go to Concord and then develop that whole area.
Yes.
So, what other things that you're thinking about? You got a lot of ideas on your mind that you've already, worked through.
Yeah. So another thing that I'm supportive of is alternate education. I like that we have charter schools, and I like that we help people get their students into those charter schools. We should be doing more to help people find the source of education that's best for their children. Ideally, what I would like to see is an education tax credit. Now, there are things on the state level that are helping with this, but we can do things locally as well. I think that it is both reasonable and fair to say that the money that someone is putting into the education system should be able to pay for their child's tuition regardless of where their child goes to school. There are critics of that will say that you're taking money away from public education, but when you implement a system like this, you're moving a student away from the public education system into private education. So you're removing the burden that that student places on that school. And we've got issues here in Nashua where some of the more popular schools like Bicentennial are suffering from overcrowding. And I would hate to see something like redistricting happen. So if we want to avoid a situation like that, we can put something in place where people, especially in these high-demand school districts, can have opportunities to send their kid to another school. We can avoid a situation where we have to do redistricting, remove some of this burden from the schools that the overcrowding puts on them, and at the same time provide better educational opportunities to students, not to mention more opportunities for teachers and administrators, some of whom would rather not work in the public school system. I've had, as I've been going door to door, I've had some teachers tell me quite candidly that they'd take a pay cut to work in a private school. And someone who would take a pay cut is the kind of teacher that you want educating your kid, right? So it's not as though this is some way for a small group of people to make more money. This is about providing better educational opportunity. I mentioned tuition, and that would be the start of it, I think, to give people who are paying property taxes an opportunity to redirect some of that. But also you want to be more inclusive. So you want to ultimately have something in place so that everyone in Nashua would like to educate their kids privately can take advantage of it.
Well, I think that's a good start on that. That Academy of Arts and of Science and Design is really an example of where students and teachers enjoy one another.
Yes, yeah. And, I come from a position where I had a mixed education. I went back and forth between private and public education. And, I can say that the time that I was in private education was far more enriching than my time in public education. And that's not true for everyone. Everyone has their own aptitudes, right. But we shouldn't try and force everyone into one system. There is no one single perfect education system. We should have a dynamic system, a system that is accommodating, and you don't do that through one centralized school system that everyone's forced into. You do that by providing the most people possible the best options available.
Well, Ron, we've run out of time, so good luck on your election, and when you get in a few months, we'll have you back here and we'll talk about how you see the whole perspective and see if it's any difference or where things are going.
Very good. I look forward to it.
Okay, and people can contact you if they need to or help you with the information we have on the end of the show.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.